Thank you, Elaine, and thanks to the Mark Twain Library and also the Reading Legal and Voters for sponsoring tonight's program. And we're happy you're all here, both in person and online, to hear this information from our esteemed guests. As Elaine stated, we are being recorded tonight, so just be aware that everything you say will be recorded for posterity's sake.
Dan, can I interrupt just briefly? Yep. We will probably take out questions from the audience, so we won't hear your voice to protect your privacy.
Okay.
So we will do some editing of the video. Thank you
for that. So let's say a few words about tonight's program and why are you here? So the proximate reason we're here is that a writing resident recently traveled abroad and experienced some more difficulties than what she would have experienced, a couple of years ago. So the world has changed now. She was traveling with her family, experienced a few bumps on the road and things that, again, wouldn't have had to deal with a couple of years ago. So things are changing in our world around us. And the overarching purpose of our panel is to help all of you, both here and online, to understand better how those things have changed, what has changed, how to navigate these dynamics in a different world. It used to be easy to travel to and from the United States. We can leave still pretty easily, but it's harder to navigate back than it used to be, even if we're residents, citizens, or have been living here for a long time. So more specifically, we want to discuss security and governmental related obstacles or aspects of travel, such as things that you might face when traveling abroad, especially with respect to re-entering the United States, to help minimize the likelihood of disruptions in your international travel, and again, on your re-entry, to help you understand how to prepare for possible unexpected experiences while you're coming back to the United States, which we'll talk about what those might be a little bit later on. And to know what your rights are. We want you to know both what your rights are and what you can do to make sure you protect and you get those rights earned or given to you, provided to you. Our panelists will also share for us what the state of Connecticut can do and does do in regards to international travel. You might be thinking, well, state? International travel borders are controlled by the federal government, not by the states, and that is true. But yet the state has resources that can help us both beforehand and if kind of issues along the way, and we have someone here to talk to us about what the state can do to help us in those regards. Before I introduce the panelists, I just want to say a few words, just background, kind of set a stage for today's conversation. And I don't have to say these things, but I would feel better if I do say these things. So if anything else, just for me. If nothing else, just for me. So we're here to conduct and engage in a constructive, productive conversation about the realities of international travel. During our conversation, you may hear from people who disagree with you or who are different from you, different perspectives or experiences from you, but we expect that you will respect them as they will respect you. Here in any public forum, we should be modeling for our children and the community at large how we can discuss potentially disruptive or controversial topics in an adult, mature fashion. So that we're truly listening to each other and not just saying what comes to mind, and spouting off maybe inappropriately. Just one more thing. We're here to talk about international travel. We're not here to talk about immigration, writ large, or about who should be here or who shouldn't be here. We're talking about what we, people who are here already, may need to think about and prepare for if leaving the country and then coming back. So again, we're not going to be discussing politics in some general way or about the administration's immigration policy. Those things are kind of off limits for tonight, so I appreciate you respecting that as well. So I think I've done enough talking for now. What I want to do is introduce our guests. We're hoping to have a relatively informal conversation, so it's a Q&A, discussion, conversation, not a bunch of short lectures about what to do or how to do it. So first of all, our first guest here is Melvette Hill. And Melvette is the Executive Director of the Connecticut Commission on Women and Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity in Hartford, which is a non-partisan commission that actually reports to the legislature, so it's part of the legislative branch, not the executive branch. And in this role, Melvette provides strategic leadership, leading a team committed to fostering inclusive, data-driven policy innovation. She champions initiatives that promote best practices, reduce barriers, and create a more equitable and accessible Connecticut for all residents. So, and Dana is online. Dana Brookson is an attorney. And unfortunately, couldn't be with us tonight in person, but fortunately could join us online. And she is an award-winning immigration attorney, a special business attorney, and a partner at Harris Beach in Merla, a law firm dating back to 1856. That's a long time. As leader of the Hartford immigration team, Dana represents businesses and individual clients on a wide range of immigration matters, making her practice one of the most comprehensive in the state of Connecticut. Since 2018, she served as the honorary consul of Romania to Connecticut, a diplomatic appointment that enables her to facilitate various cross-border, cross-cultural interactions and exchanges with Romania and the United States, or Connecticut in particular. Something else impressive about Dana is that she speaks many languages. So she speaks English, as I will see, Spanish, French, and Romanian, and has some basic knowledge of Italian, German, Hungarian, and, as we were joking earlier, Latin, which she promised me she would not speak Latin tonight to us in this forum. Before we get to the nitty-gritty of travel, I want to ask the panelists to talk about what they do a little bit first. Then we'll go on talking about some more travel-related issues. So Melvette, if you could start with talking about your commission, kind of what it does, how it serves the people of the state, and so forth.
Yes, thank you. So thank you so much for having me and also organizing this important conversation. Thanks so much to my good friend Beatrice Erickson and Elaine and you, Dr. Barrett, and of course, our honorable legislator, who's next to us. So the work of our commission is really, we are legislative staff. So as I see legislators about the state, I'm like, I work for you, right? I support the work that they do. And we are an extension of your legislators. We go out into community and we like to listen and hear what issues concerning to women and children and older adults, as well as different groups, cultural groups like African Americans, Latinos and Puerto Ricans, as well as Asian American Pacific Islanders. And so that work has evolved over a number of years. We used to be 6 commissions, now we are 1, henceforth the very long name. And we do a lot of work that looks around policy innovation. So policies that are currently existing, we're looking at how are these helping or hurting, but we're also bringing that innovation to the legislature. So a lot of our work is around research. We do a lot of testimony, so we're also testifying just like the public testifies. And we're bringing these solutions to the legislature and also to agencies that serve the state of Connecticut. So we do a lot of work across the 3 branches of government. And also we are conveners. So we host probably 100+ events throughout the year, both at the Capitol and also in community. So right now we are hosting listening sessions throughout the state. We have about 22 scheduled and some virtual ones. So I'll make sure that we ensure that you have access to those as well. And finally, we are a policy shop. So policy is, our key focus. And how can we not always legislate, right? Because people think about policy and think about law, but policy also exists outside of a legislative process, right? And so we work with the executive branch of government, so the different agencies like the Office of Early Childhood or State Department of Education on good policy and practice. How can we work together before we have to legislate something? So that's kind of like what we do. Work on all these issues that concern residents.
Thank you. I realized I forgot to introduce Anne. So sorry about that, Anne. So Anne Hughes, as you see, is a state representative for the Reading and the area around. And this is your 4th term.
It is my 4th.
And I recall your very first campaign, and things have changed quite a bit since you were first elected to the House. But you want to tell us more about yourself, about these committees that you're on, that are relevant to this conversation, and also about your social work background.
Yeah. So, social worker first, probably, and then I'm feeling like, hey, we're ideally suited to bring good policy to the table because we're in the trenches, right? I specialize in social work with geriatric folks, so seniors are my jam. But really, I've become super interested in human services, and so I'm on the Human Services Committee, and all through COVID, that was incredibly important as we figured out how to save lives and protect folks in nursing homes and patients get access to healthcare and vaccines and stuff. I serve on the Labor and Public Employees Committee, and again, being of the workforce, I feel like every worker deserves access to equitable pay and retirement and sick days and protections for the work that they do, especially in direct care and a lot of dangerous or exposing industries. And really, we realized who was essential during the pandemic and what kinds of things we needed to do to increase that pipeline and protect those workers, because we couldn't really operate without them. So labor and public employees is really important about that. I'm also on the aging committee, and we've passed a lot of transformative legislation this year, most recently with the biomarker testing to ensure that everybody gets tested for possible conditions and diseases that and cancer screenings and so forth, and that the insurance must pay for it. You don't have to be a senior to do that, but we put that into statute because, again, access to healthcare is foundational to us operating in a civil and free society.
And when is that effective? What's the date for that effectiveness?
Is it January 1? I think it's January 1 of 2026. Again, I think that's going to save lives. Like, let's do everything we can. And I'm also on energy and technology, which is a big, important thing. I just spent all morning at the United Illuminating headquarters going through the rate review process on what they can raise rates on, what they can't, what's behind that. And I know that's super important to everybody in Connecticut because we pay high energy rates and it's been a really hot topic. So we're trying to get to those nuts and bolts. But in this crisis, we are, we're talking about the realities that have changed in international travel, but I'm here to also represent what the ripple effects are across Connecticut with our students that come into our state for higher ed from other countries, with the research that you mentioned that we are using so many folks, the expertise and the minds from all over the world, and how their travel might be impacted, and of course our day-to-day trying to come and go. We're thinking about how Connecticut can protect we have one international airport, how can we protect our people and fund our services and keep them going, especially during a shutdown where we might have, delays and TSA agents and all kinds of people not getting paid and air traffic controllers and all kinds of things. So there's so many layers to how is the state going to be able to make up the gaps and keep our state operational and whole. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. So Dana, can you provide us with maybe a quick overview of what your practice is and what your experiences are? And then we'll talk about, just sort of generally about you, and then we'll come back to the topic in a couple minutes.
Sure. As you kindly introduced me, I am first and foremost an immigration attorney and a partner at Harris Beach Murtha, a pretty large law firm here on the Northeast Coast with 250 plus lawyers, 16 plus offices located in Connecticut, in Hartford, Connecticut, in Hartford, New Haven, Stamford, and one other place in Connecticut that doesn't come to mind. It's a rural area type of office, but all over Boston and New York State, DC and New Jersey. And as part of this larger law firm, my practice focuses first and foremost on business immigration, investment-based immigration, employment-based immigration, but I've made it my life choice, my professional life choice, to also represent folks with family immigration petitions, as well as, and this is very important these days, removal defense, detention defense, humanitarian cases, asylum seekers, folks from Ukraine, Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and a bunch of other places who have been targeted with status revocations. And it's important for me to practice comprehensively, because you never know, while representing an employer in business immigration or employment-based immigration, their employee may be from any one of these places and lose status. And if you're not proficient in humanitarian-based immigration, you won't be able to advise even the business clients. The other side of what I do, which you also kindly mentioned, is a diplomatic appointment as Honorary Consul of Romania to Connecticut. As such, I am a private citizen, not employed by the Romanian government, but charged with representing Romanian interests in Connecticut. And there's a lot of fun in that. It's not the grunt part of it, which is career diplomats. It's much more so the representing of Romanian culture, Romanian food, wines, business exchanges, legal, medical, etc., other types of exchanges. Now, I'm going to make a parenthesis and tell you that there's a great Romanian restaurant in the state of Connecticut, in East Haven, Connecticut. It's October, so the name is Transylvania Restaurant, an actual region in Romania. And all of you should go and check it out. East Haven, Connecticut, Transylvania Restaurant. There you go. I just performed the diplomatic function.
Thank you.
Yes.
So let's talk about travel then. I'm going to ask Melvette to talk about the role that Connecticut has in travel, so the context for travel, context for immigration, a little bit more about travel. And so Melvette, you can go ahead and speak to that, please.
Yeah, so I think, Representative Hughes, I think you said some of the things that I wanted to say, right? But I think at the end of the day, we want people to know that the state of Connecticut is here to support you. And that travel is not just about having fun, but it's a lot about connection. It's about connection to family, it's about connection to opportunity, or even for some people, connection to home, right? Going back home from where people might have been born. And so it is important that we understand like this landscape of international travel. And as you seek out resources, we want you to know what the resources are that are already available to you before you even, no offense, Dana, have to see an attorney, right, to get some help.
Well, you're free and she's not, so that's, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm free only because the taxpayers are paying for us to be here, right? And so you are already paying for some of those services that are afforded to you, that are some easy access points to get information. Dana will come in and she will refine things and give you the comprehensive package. And again, her heart is in it, as you can hear, right? Like this is her life work. And so what we want to share today is that, how many of you have ever been in contact with the Office of the Secretary of the State here in Connecticut? How many?
If you have a business, you have.
Okay, a few, all right. Don't be afraid. The Secretary of the State, Stephanie Thomas, is a wonderful human being. Her staff is amazing. And did you know that they provide apostille and authentication services, right? So when you have to have documents validated, like birth certificates, marriage licenses, or school transcripts for when you go abroad, right? Or like if you're studying abroad, or they can help, right? So the Secretary of the State can do that for you. They also guide residents in obtaining certified copies that you might need for travel, right? So different countries might require different things. They're able to assist you with that. Again, this is something that's offered through the state. Okay, everyone has interacted with Department of Motor Vehicles, right? Yes. How many of you have a real ID? I don't. I've been hanging on to my passport only because I've been so busy working for you, the people of Connecticut. So you can get your real ID at the DMV, right? And you have to just provide the appropriate documentation. I would say it's always good to have your real ID, so that's for domestic travel, but like your real ID and your passport, right? Because if something happens, and Dana will probably talk more about this, right? You want to have multiple forms of ID, right? If someone takes your passport, because that has happened, or you lose your passport, right? To have other IDs. Also, you want to have pictures and copies of your IDs as well. The Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection, commonly known as DESPP, they offer resources through Emergency Management Division, and they tell you how to prepare for travel. They tell you about all the safety things that you'll need to know to have an emergency contact plan when you're traveling out of the country, international alerts and advisories. Those are the folks who can tap you into that. So sometimes, like, I fly Delta a lot, right? That's my airline. No offense to anybody else, but Delta will have like travel advisories that'll pop up. But you can go to one place and get all the travel advisories for everywhere.
What was the name?
Oh, it's the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection
For Connecticut.
for Connecticut. And then also, we maintain really good relationships with foreign consuls, right? So Dana is a Romanian consul, right? So across Latin America, Europe, Africa, and Asia, we have lots of consuls here. And when you're traveling abroad, right, like you want to be able to know where your US embassy is as well as your consulate. So, but you can find that information here as well. And then finally, Bradley, our only international airport, go Bradley. They have the Travelers Aid and Community Resource Center. And so this is really great on-site support for travelers. So they can assist you if you lose like your documents, if you miss a connection, like for your flights, or if you face like any unexpected reentry challenges, they can help you as well. And then they also work really well. Here's another resource people don't know about. So if you're just, I'm overwhelmed by all this information Melvette is giving me right now, you can just call United Way's 211. And like, I have a question, I'm about to travel, I need resources. You call 211, you might not know it, but they have a great resource where they'll be able to give you all the information I just gave you. What do you need? I need to have this document, or I'm not sure what I need. I need to have an emergency travel plan. 211, right? If you can't remember anything else, you can also call 211.
211 CT.
Yeah, 211 CT. So when you're here in Connecticut,
also
211.
Do it online.
So I'm gonna pause there. I think that's
That's
a
a
start.
lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. We'll pause there. I mean, the final thing I would say is also know your state legislator, right? And so if you know, if you need help, she has cards.
The cell numbers
And
on
you're
it.
like,
call
Representative
me.
Hughes,
Yes.
I'm in a pickle, something's
That's right.
happening.
No, absolutely.
Right?
I can call the commissioner or whatever,
Yes.
and literally, they'll be like, you're like, I'm calling my state legislator. They're like, oh, okay. You know, they don't know, like, that I might not have the answer, but I can find somebody who does.
Right.
I mean,
And if you can't get her directly, she has constituent services, but this also goes for your congressional representation as well. So know your federal congressperson.
Jim Himes.
Yes, so Jim Hines for this area, and they also have constituent services. This is what they are built for. They are built to help solve problems. So when you're traveling or you're trying to get out of the country, you can't get what you need, always, contact your legislators. Those are good options for you. Okay, I'll pause there.
Thank you very much. So I want to return to Dana then. So Dana, let's assume that I'm a first time travel abroad. I haven't done it before. I have a passport. I know it's not going to expire for at least 6 months past my dates. That's why I have tickets and what have you. But what else should I do to prepare myself for all the stuff with regards to the border, maybe leaving, certainly coming back? What things should I be doing? What should I be thinking about for me and my family in terms of traveling abroad?
Okay, so I'm going to assume you're a US citizen, right? You mentioned that you have a passport that's expiring in more than 6 months. Is that what you said?
So I'm fine with the passport.
Right. So one thing that we should all know is that travel to most European countries, for example, require more than 6 months validity date before you could board a plane. Otherwise, they might deny you boarding. Because as an American citizen, while you are more than welcome to spend up to 90 days on European territory, for example, without a visa yet, they are very sensitive to the fact that you might be forced to overstay for whatever reasons, and your passport may run out. So that's why they require you to make sure you have a US passport that's valid for longer than 6 months when you plan an international trip. And I know a lot of people have run into this issue. They only noticed as they were about to board the plane that their passport is expiring in 2 weeks from now or something similar. So for those emergency situations, there's a center in Stamford, Connecticut, another one in New York, another one in Boston, a passport center, emergency passport center, where if you could prove your impending travel, you could get an emergency US passport in as little as same day. I've tested it. You could get it same day. You shouldn't push it though, because we've been lucky to be able to get it same day. But if it's overcrowded and a lot of people want to leave, you want to plan ahead of time and book an appointment with them so that you give them a few days of issuing this passport. Usually a US passport is issued regular processing 4 to 6 weeks, expedited processing about 2 weeks. Emergency processing could be if you push it the same day, but give them a little more time. Okay. What else should you be concerned about as you travel internationally? So remember, we are in a time of very strict immigration enforcement, which you might say to yourself, well, how does that concern me? I'm a US citizen. Nobody should bother me. I have a US passport. Well, by the time anybody figures out who's a US citizen, who's not, you're going to be screened and you're going to be bothered, whether you like it or not. So I prepared a little bit of a presentation, but you just give me the cue as to when I could share it with you about what rights attach to what statuses: US citizen, permanent residents, non-immigrant visa holders. If this is a good moment, I could go into it and share my screen. Okay, so I called my presentation "To Travel or Not to Travel, Navigating US Border During Stricter Immigration Enforcement," on the premise that, again, while most of you, if not all of you, or all of us are US citizens, nonetheless, you stand to be touched by the heightened scrutiny at the US border, even if you are a US citizen, at the very least until they figure out that you're in your special lane called US citizens, right? I love this quote from Mark Twain, and because this is the Mark Twain library, I'm sure you've heard it before: how travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. I thought that's a great advertisement for international travel. And I have to tell you, when I travel to Romania, I feel I represent Connecticut when I go to Romania. And this is the quote I keep giving to Romanian officials to brag about my adoptive state of Connecticut. So they love it, by the way, they love it. And everybody knows Mark Twain in Romania. We've grown reading him. So this is an already well-known author, and the fact that we can associate him with Connecticut, is amazing. They even have a Mark Twain International School of Bucharest, named after him, precisely because of what he represents internationally regarding travel and opening one's horizons by traveling internationally. All right. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about your rights that attach to your particular travel category or status. But before I delve into that, obviously you have more or less right depending on whether you're a US citizen, an LPR, which is a lawful permanent resident, also known as a green card holder, or a non-immigrant visa holder, like an F1 student visa, etc., or whether you're an arriving alien, meaning people with no documentation to come in, also known as illegal entrants or undocumented entrants, etc. These days, they dub them, for immigration purposes, arriving aliens. Now, I wanted to raise awareness because I've had way too many cases lately, especially in this day and age of heightened enforcement, with people coming back from US territories and just relaxing in the America Samoa and US Virgin Islands, thinking there's nothing wrong with the world and there's no passport to show when you return. Wrong, right? Careful. If you're a US citizen traveling to America Samoa, which is a US territory, you'll be very surprised that you'll be asked for a US passport when you come back in. Yes, it's a US territory, but also it has its own CBP immigration infrastructure. U.S. Virgin Islands is a little bit different in that it doesn't bother U.S. citizens for a passport. You could travel to the U.S. Virgin Islands without a passport. However, if you have a foreign national friend tagging along, and this has been the case way too many times, which is why I am raising awareness with you. Careful about traveling to the U.S. Virgin Islands with foreign national friends, because unbeknownst to them, they're exiting the United States and they're going to be asked for the mother of all documentations when they come back in. And a lot of them are not prepared to show it. I'll tell you concrete examples of what happened. A lot of people here are in extended visitor status and they think U.S. Virgin Islands is part of the U.S. and yoo-hoo, let's go have fun. And they are surprised to come back and be taken separately in secondary inspection by CBP and told, whoa, you've been spending way too much time on U.S. territory. We think you intend to immigrate. You're a non-immigrant visa holder. Therefore, we're just going to not let you enter the United States. And a lot of people have been deported at the border coming back from the U.S. Virgin Islands after they mistakenly thought that they were traveling to a domestic destination. So careful. I want you to understand the levels of immigration, not because we're talking about immigration as much today, but because you need to understand why they're different, right? So there's three big levels of legal aliens. It's the non-immigrant visa holders, like the F1 student visa holders who get CPT and OPT work permits, like the H-1B work visa holders. And then there's this category called green card that signifies permanent residence and can be obtained either by employment or family or asylum or a few other channels. And then 3 to 5 years after being on a green card, people can become eligible for U.S. citizenship for naturalization. It's 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen. It's 5 years if you got your green card any other way, like through employment or asylum or some other method. There's also the 1-year naturalization option for people who register with the armed services, the U.S. Armed Services. So that's expedited naturalization. Won't bother you much with how much there is. Let me just tell you that there is a non-immigrant visa for every letter of the alphabet, and even more for each letter of the alphabet, and 20 plus types of green cards. So it's complicated. What I do on the immigration side is very, very complicated. All right, and like I said, immigration status dictates rights at the border. Okay, so let's get into it, right? Can a CBP officer ask you, a U.S. citizen, about immigration status? Absolutely. They need to separate you to ascertain your citizenship, and as a U.S. citizen, you have an obligation to confirm your identity and citizenship. Green card holders, they also must show proof of identity and status. Non-citizens are subject to more questioning, and refusing to answer can result in denial of entry. Not so for U.S. citizens. You, as a U.S. citizen, are not allowed to be turned away. Like, you are owed entry to the United States. Can they ask about religious or political views? They're supposed to be protected by the First Amendment. If you're a citizen or a green card holder, you can refuse to answer without losing your entry rights. Like I said, they owe you an entry into your own country. Non-citizens, they can deny or decline all they want, but they risk delay or denial of entry. There are people coming to our borders who fear persecution if returned back home. Those are asylum seekers, right? At that point in time, if they fear that they would be returned to a place of persecution, they should state so to CBP and request asylum. Can green card holders be denied reentry? Yes, absolutely. Here's how this could happen. they lived abroad for longer than 6 months. Not many people know this, but once you become a permanent resident of the United States, you have an obligation to spend at least 6 months every year in the United States. If you spend more than 6 months abroad, you could be denied entry upon your return. Obviously, criminal convictions are, or even admitting to criminal activity to the officer, could lead a green card holder to be denied entry, and engaging in illegal activity abroad. Now, a lot of people are concerned today about expressing political views online or participating in protests, and what would that do to trigger additional scrutiny at the border. I'm gonna tell you about my personal experience visiting CBP officers at JFK Airport. I like interacting with CBP, ICE, and any other officers who could enlighten me as to why they do what they do. I think that's an exchange of knowledge that makes me a better lawyer and makes me able to tell you how things really work. And so I met with the CBP, about 8 or so CBP officers, top level at JFK Airport, alongside my immigration attorney's colleagues from Connecticut. And we had a really nice discussion, and we checked and asked all of our questions. And my conclusions are this: there's a primary inspection officer and a secondary inspection officer. The primary inspection officer is the guy or the girl who processes you very fast, like very fast, automatic. They check your face and welcome back home. That's the primary officer. That person does not have in-depth access to intelligence on you. Does not, I repeat, does not have access to in-depth intelligence on you. Does not have the time to search you up on social media. Does not have the time to know what type of views you've been espousing. That primary officer has to be told by some sort of intel from somewhere else if there's something on you or on anybody, okay? So it's quite easy to pass that filter because they're busy, especially at JFK. In addition to being busy, the reason why they don't dwell on this, they assure us, is at JFK, they struck us as highly professional officers on the force for 17 plus years. These people are not into checking social media and punishing you for some sort of conduct. They're just there to protect the nation's borders and make sure that they're secure and nobody bad comes in who wants to hurt us. Of course, they are subject to direct policies from above. However, they only refer you to a secondary inspection officer if there's specific intel from some central agency that keeps track of you. And what they're trying to tell me is that it would be a violation of civil rights and liberty for anybody to just feed intelligence based on what you wrote on Facebook or what you've done, unless it is dangerous to Homeland Security, in which case there's serious intel on you, unrelated to your border entry, and it would be fed to the primary officer, who would then see that there's some intel, would have their screen bleep, and you would be referred to a secondary inspection officer for further questioning, which further questioning can very well result in the conclusion that, well, nothing to see here now that we've seen it. So go on your merry way, you're all fine. Or who knows what else, depending on what's there. So unless there's intel on anybody's proclivity to be harmful to this nation, most people should not worry about whether their Facebook or protest activities are being monitored, especially if they're US citizens. What about searches and seizures of devices? Can CBP search your electronic devices? Yes, by law, they can inspect and copy device contents without even suspicion. However, as a citizen, you cannot be denied entry based on not cooperating with a device search. You may face delays, or they may take away your device. That is something they have the power to do. Green card holders have similar rights. Non-citizens may be denied entry for refusal. So this is where it depends on where you are, in what category you are, and those are the rights that attach to you. What are best practices if you want to avoid the search and seizure of your device? I would not use biometrics like fingerprints or Face ID to unlock your phone. Rather, switch to using password. If CBP wants to get your password to look into your Facebook and social media, etc., and you're inclined to cooperate, rather than giving them your password, enter the password yourself, right? Because you don't want to give password forever and ever to your devices. Even a better idea is use burner phones that have no access to no networks that they could search. I've read somewhere that placing your phone, I'm not an IT expert, okay? I am not. But I've read that placing your phone on airplane mode protects against that someone seeing your data on that network, on their Wi-Fi. So if you want to avoid that, you put the phone on airplane mode and nobody could get into your network. So if you have to take your actual phone with access to all these social media, etc., then put it on airplane mode, make sure it's activated by password. And if you have to give the password away, enter it yourself rather than giving it to the officer.
So just say they want to see my phone and I say no, and they take my phone. What are my rights to get that phone back? How can I get it back? When will I get it back? Will I get it back? And so forth. They may say, give me your phone, and then you can go home, but I also want my phone back. So how would that part of the process work?
I don't practice in that type of practice area of recovering property from CBP. I could tell you as a non-expert of what we've read in the news. We've noticed that when they seize your devices, they take quite their time to go through it, right? And so not all people can expect to recover their phones on the spot, unfortunately. In fact, we've had a recent case that I just struck me how apropos it was. It was an immigration attorney from Boston whose phone got seized, and he went and got a federal court order to stop CBP from accessing his client list, and two, obtaining an injunction against utilizing client data to enforce against those clients. And that is, I believe, every immigration attorney's worst nightmare, that our own clients, many of whom may not be in regular status, because that's our function. We take people from irregular statuses and we legalize them. That's what we do. And so for CBP to get into or ICE or whoever, to get into your phone and extract data on your clients who are in irregular status and then go after them, that is our worst nightmare. And so a federal judge in Massachusetts, I believe, issued an injunction and ordered the phone to be returned, and any and all data that was copied to be deleted immediately and never utilized for enforcement actions. So that's the best I could tell you. It's a it's a new issue for us as well. We've never dealt with this before. Here's how you could reduce risks at reentry. Answer only what's being asked, right? Brief and truthful. I wouldn't volunteer extra information. Only provide the requested documents. Don't overwhelm them, but here's my birth certificate, and if you don't believe my passport, I'm going to give you 10 more things to. No, it's okay. US passport is very credible. Stay calm and honest. Never lie. That is never a good thing. And review your devices. Um, it's not just the mobile phone, it's the laptops and other digital devices that they can inspect. Be aware of what's stored and what's visible. Even innocent information can be misinterpreted. They don't know how to read your stuff. So hence why I've always said it's best if you have a burner phone on you rather than your actual phone. But if you have to, absolutely have to, reduce the amount of data that could be exposed, right? Here are some examples of risk factors. Criminal history or prior arrests. Mere arrests are enough to trigger inquiry. So we live in the day and age where, and I'll tell you why, because when you re-enter, most of us are getting fingerprinted, especially the foreign nationals. And fingerprints can trigger any type of arrest. But when they look, especially the primary inspection officer who doesn't have in-depth access, all they see is that your fingerprints match an arrest record. And that's enough to trigger the mother of all secondary inspections, even as that arrest has been dismissed, or you've been declared innocent, or not guilty, or etc. But they cannot see the conclusion of that arrest. The burden is on you to present evidence that that arrest has been taken care of. It's been done. Not as important with US citizens, but some US citizens are, if you're a US citizen with an arrest warrant on you and you don't even know it, you failed to appear somewhere for some court action. You didn't pay your parking ticket, your speeding ticket, etc. And they called you into court and you, a US citizen, failed to appear because you didn't know you had court. And all of a sudden, there's a failure to appear warrant on you. And you're coming back from your wonderful trip in Transylvania, Romania. And you're hitting the border and there's that arrest warrant. That's an example of when even US citizens can be taken into custody because there's a separate criminal warrant for you. So just be very aware of what could be on you as you leave the country. For non-US citizens, it's very risky if they have previous visa or immigration violations, such as living too long of a time abroad as a green card holder. Yes, for non-citizens, social media activity or public statements that are critical of certain US policies can count against them at the border, just because non-immigrant visas are very flimsy. They could, the US giveth, the US taketh away with the slightest problem. Not exactly the slightest problem, but you get my point. That status is very flimsy. So those people need to be very careful what they do because their stances on certain US policies could be misinterpreted as, being harmful to the national security. Primary and secondary inspection, I told you about it. It's the difference between the busy person at the first counter and it's easy to pass that. But if that busy person gets intel on you that you're dangerous or somehow connected with an arrest record, then you're going to be referred to secondary inspection. And you could technically, I don't know if you knew this, but if you end up in secondary inspection, you're technically detained because you're not free to go. You're not free to leave. You have to always ask if you're free to leave. But secondary inspection is a space in an airport where for hours you sit and wait your turn to be interrogated by a secondary CBP officer. And during that time, technically it's detention time.
So just say I go through, I get past the primary and the secondary person says, hey, can you stand over here for a few minutes? I have questions for you. It pulls me aside, I'm still in the open area, right by the gates, but they start asking me questions there. Is that detention, or does it require me being brought back to some other space, so what actually constitutes detention? Once that detention happens, exactly what rights do I lose? You're saying I can't go anywhere until they tell me I can leave? That's one of the things, but anything else I might lose then?
Well, remember, as a US citizen, you can never be denied entry, no matter what you've done with your life. Doesn't matter how many arrests, doesn't matter anything. No matter what, you cannot be denied entry as a US citizen. So technically speaking, this secondary inspection as detention for US citizens only works in the context of there's a pending warrant on you and they're holding you there. And because technically speaking, you could say to them, look, officer, there's no pending warrant on me, I don't think. And I don't know why you're keeping me here for hours to inspect me and question me. Am I free to go? Because I would like to go. You cannot deny me entry. And technically, they cannot deny you entry. So technically, there is no detention for non-criminal, non-wanted US citizens. There is no such thing as detention, as there shouldn't be any detention at the border. So the operative question that you need to ask at that point in time, especially if you're bored and you don't want to put up with hours of waiting, is, officer, am I free to go? I understand this is my US passport and it's free to gain me entry. So why am I here for? Right? And if they say, yes, you're free to go, then go. Then it's not detention any longer the minute they say you're free to go. That is the difference between detention and non-detention. If the officer says you're free to go, you are not detained. If the officer says you're not free to go, you are technically detained. So there you go. This much more so applies to non-citizens. I just want to tell you that the incidence of US citizens getting detained is very, very small. It's basically the people who have wanted warrants on them, or fake passports, or they're faking an identity, or some major issues. That's beyond just regular US citizens critiquing any, policies. Okay? All right. And my last slides before we get into question and answer is just to let you know who we are. But I told you from the beginning who we are and what we do as a law firm. We do have tentacles around the world through our Lex Mundi affiliation in over 100 countries, including Romania and Eastern Europe. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I welcome any further questions you might have.
Thank you, Dana. So before we have questions, do either of you want to speak, respond or add to what Dana has spoken about?
No, I'll just wait to see if you have questions.
Ann?
I would just say that knocking on your doors, we have a lot of mixed status households in Reading and in the surrounding areas. We have a lot of folks that are married to green card holders, and this does affect them. So they are concerned about their ability to go back and forth and, visit their family. I know several constituents whose loved ones are ailing or dying in that other country, and they feel tremendously at risk of going home to deal with their family members when, they're not assured that they will be allowed back in for taking care of business. So this does affect our residents. I have also had other colleagues that say that their constituents, their hairdressers, whoever, have been detained for hours and hours. Somebody who is trying to, at JFK, somebody who is trying to go in for addressing a arrest warrant is at risk, and the arrest warrant was for I think a DUI or something, so there are so many layers of complications that we weren't dealing with a couple of years ago and we are dealing with now. And I think the burner phone thing is really important. I'm telling constituents that all the time. I know it seems hard to wean from this phone, but there's a lot of data on there, and we're not sure we're protecting it. We're not sure constituents' data or whatever that we would not want to go into the wrong hands. And we're not clear with cybersecurity that they don't have geocaching, that they can tell, names and contacts. And that's one of the things that in a special session, we're really trying to protect our data the state systems that we use. Medicaid, we cover every eligible mother who is giving birth for postpartum up to 12 months. We don't want that data to be leaked and people hunted down after giving birth, for instance.
So questions, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, do naturalized citizens have exactly the same rights and protections as people who were like native born?
David, you got that?
Great question. Yes, once you're a US citizen, you're supposed to have the exact same rights and protections as natural born US citizens. However, what I'm getting is a lot of concerned naturalized citizens who come to my office and they ask me, how can their naturalization be unraveled by current policies? They're afraid that someone might go back and denaturalize them. And that's where the fear is. So I just want to address the fear a little bit and explain to you how denaturalization proceedings are supposed to work. To denaturalize someone in this country, especially after more than 5 years have passed since that person's naturalization, is virtually impossible and has historically only been done for two reasons. Either treason, and by the way, that can actually happen to a US born citizen. If a US born citizen is accused of treason, like going out there and joining ISIS and killing US troops, that's treason, okay? And even US born citizens could lose US citizenship on account of treason. This is not new stuff. This has been baked into the laws for a long time, let alone naturalized citizens, right? If they commit treason and are harmful to US troops or to the US population, they could be denaturalized. But the second ground is fraud or misrepresentation in the way they obtained citizenship at any point in time along the way, whether it was when they obtained their first visa or later on when they obtained their green card or later on when they obtained their citizenship. Now, traditionally, it's been applied to folks like Nazis or people who lied and hid their past because they had something to hide, for sure. There's been a question on U.S. naturalization forms since the 1940s, after World War II, that asks you, have you ever been a Nazi? Have you ever worked in a concentration camp? La, la, la. And if you consistently answered, no, 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 who, me? Not me. But then we find out then there's proof that this person has been a Nazi concentration camp person, then those were the people that the US government went back and denaturalized them by suing them in federal court and proving before a federal judge all these facts. The burden of proof is very, very high for the government. The government has to have a rock solid case against you in order to denaturalize you based on fraud and misrepresentation. That being said, lately in 2025, there's new guidance provided by the DOJ, Department of Justice, in 2025 that add fraud and misrepresentation charges to the impetus to investigate certain naturalized citizens. There's more of an impetus to start looking at old naturalization applications and open them up and figure out if there's been any fraud committed these days. And it starts with the investigation. But make no mistake, for that investigation to result in a denaturalization of a person, the US government is obligated under very solid laws, long-standing laws, to sue the person in front of a federal judge, not an immigration judge, a federal judge, an independent Congress-mandated Article 3 federal judge, and prove the whole fraud and misrepresentation and that it is material and that it actually caused naturalization where it wouldn't have happened had we known about that fraud. So it's got to be big fraud, material enough fraud. So that hopefully answers people's fears about naturalization or denaturalization.
Based on what you just said, one of the questions I have has more to do with perception. As you said, there's long-standing laws in terms of what the federal government can and cannot do. But I think there's also a perception that a lot of that in today's environment is a fluidity to that. And it's contingent upon what judge you land and et cetera, et cetera. How fluid are you finding it versus, or are the laws being able to, standing the test of that idea of fluidity?
So remember how I told you that rights attach to your immigration status? The higher you are, the more you are, if you're a US citizen, highest rights, then green card holders, then non-immigrant visa. Same with our system of justice. The highest banquet of justice, if I may call it so, in my perspective and given my experience, is in the federal judiciary. Federal judges, Article 3, independent, congressionally appointed federal judges are the most independent judiciary that we have and the highest caliber in my perspective. However, so who ends up before federal judges? Mostly US citizens. Therefore, they're going to get most likely more justice. Where do immigrants, non-citizens end up? In immigration courts. Let's talk about immigration courts. Okay, immigration courts are not independent. They are administrative courts under the jurisdiction of the DOJ, Department of Justice, which is an executive agency. Therefore, green card holders, non-immigrant visa holders, arriving aliens, all these people have to go get justice from an agency that is subordinated to the policies of the president du jour. Okay? And so when you ask me that question, in my head, there's a split. Federal judiciary, I believe in it. I've seen it work with certain exceptions. I mean, there's some judges that don't share those values, but most federal judges I found them to be very caring of due process and fairness and rights for all, including immigrants. But when you're talking about the immigration court and deportations and removals and detentions under the immigration court system, yeah, no. That's what's suffering right now. And so hopefully that answers your question.
Can I just add, Dana, to that end, they've been getting fired. One of our prominent immigration judges was our former Office of the Healthcare Advocate, great advocate, Ted Doolittle, just got fired by the DOJ like 2 weeks ago. It breaks my heart because these are really important, good faith, civic servants that are now no longer allowed to do their job under this administration. Along with, I believe, even federal judges, right? We've been seeing an exodus of those. So we are losing our faith in these Article 3 balance of justice because we have, appointees that are not acting in good faith anymore. They're just acting under the loyalty of the president du jour.
So thank you for mentioning that. But another good point would be to say that these judges, independent or not, we, the American people, need to give them better laws. These are the days when we find out that we've been having broken laws for a long time, and our Congress has not gotten together to reform them for a very long time. And so maybe I would understand that in the context of immigrants, because it's easy to slip into them, immigrants, versus us, citizens. But I've been surprised to see how even US citizens married to foreign nationals, those US citizens have their rights trampled upon and have been having their rights trampled upon for decades, and we haven't fixed it. And I've always wondered, why is it that us US citizens put up with this instead of making Congress do better laws and feeding better laws to all these independent judges? If they had better laws, they would help us more, I believe. And so it is up to us to make better laws. And we could do that even today. We don't have to sit and wait and see what happens to 14 million undocumented, how many removals, detentions, how much cruelty is going to get inflicted. We could actually get together and push Congress and give them a homework and tell them, do better laws, do better. It has been proven that when they want to reform the immigration laws, they can do it, but in the bad sense. Just in January 2025, they passed a new immigration law after like 20, 30 years of no action on immigration. What do they pass? The Laken-Riley Act. What does that do? It creates a whole new class of deportable aliens based on a mere arrest. And right now, there's loads of detention centers filled with immigrants who have been arrested but declared not guilty. But because of that arrest, that fingerprint taken in their system, even if they've been found innocent, they're still in ICE detention center due to the Laken-Riley Act that makes it mandatory for ICE to detain anybody based on a mere arrest for certain crimes, even as little as shoplifting, right? So when Congress wants to, it can get together, but why does it pass laws that make it worse on immigrants rather than create legal avenues? And that's up to us. We need to feed better laws to these judges.
I have another question for Melvette. So as you're doing your work throughout, and representatives you as well, how aware or well versed are you finding your constituents as you do on these matters as you're going around, and what do you think is like sort of like the most pressing piece of information that people are not having to better understand how to navigate today's challenges?
I think there's two things. I think one, there's fear, right? So we're hearing a lot of fear from both actually US citizens as well as people who might have different citizenship status or documentation or papers or lack thereof. And people are just fearful. They're not sure if it's going to be them next or a family member who's going to be snatched up, right? So I think that is really the climate throughout the state in many communities, many communities, that whether people are working or going to school, if it's a colleague, right? If someone's to work late, it's like what happened to them. And so it's beyond, we've moved beyond a fear of it's just people who are undocumented or people who might have committed a crime who are undocumented. We have seen, and this is a non-partisan issue, right? So it's not Democrats in the state who are kind of purporting this. This is across all parties that we're hearing, right? That there's a great concern that, what are people's rights and what if I'm next, right? I would just also say that there's this misconception around political party in the state, that a lot of people assume that a lot of our Latino and Hispanic community members are Democrats. And many of them are Republican, just so you know, right? And so this is not a partisan issue where people are like, oh, it's the Democrats and they're fighting for this, and it's those people over here. This is really an issue across all different races, all different backgrounds, that there's a deep concern for it. So I would say that's one thing that we're hearing a concern. The other thing, too, to Dana's point, is that this is up to all of us, right? Like, we are in a representative democracy, and we are a republic in a representative democracy, and so we, the people, we have a voice, and so we shouldn't operate in our country in fear, right? Especially if you're a US citizen. But what is it that each of us can do to make something different, right? So we're having this conversation, a quite privileged conversation around travel. If I decide to travel outside the country, then, what do I need to know and how do I get back, right? And we have to sit in that this is a amenable conversation that we can have. But what is it that we do next to change some of those things that we're talking about, some of the fear or some of these things that we feel that we are powerless? You know, civic engagement is still a thing, right, in our country. And so just like we vote, there are things that we can do. You can write your congressperson, right? Like we are the ones who make the change happen. Our representatives, believe it or not, don't move unless they hear from us. And in many cases, they're making moves without you because they haven't heard from you, right? So that's both your local representation, like in your state, it's also in your city, your town, right? If we're not reaching out to our elected officials and saying, this is what I need, this is what I want, let's have a conversation, then they're doing those things on their own. And so very much when we are sleeping at night, Congress is making decisions about us, without us. And so I would say that there needs to be this infusion, this tapping in and waking up to what is it that one person can do. Can I be more informed? Can I advocate for someone? Can I write my congressperson and say, I don't understand this, or why is this happening? How can we make a change? If one person did that and then another and then another and then hundreds of people reached out to Hines, right? And he's like, oh, this is the thing. Oh, I gotta talk about this. But if we don't, it never becomes a thing to them. So I hope that answers your question. But I would say that this is really not about, I'm not saying go out and protest. I'm not saying do those things. I'm just saying we have rights as US citizens, just like we have rights to re-enter our country. We also have rights to make our voice heard and to ensure that this is a representative democracy, that your elected leaders are really fighting for the things that are important to you.
Anne, do you want to add to that?
Well, I would echo Melvette that we, the people, have power that we have not yet, felt, I think, collectively in the face of neighbors and you know, family members being kidnapped or abused on the, you know, street just going to work. Like that is like shocking to us. So I've heard, you know, from constituents shocked about that, and the fear is real. I got called from a constituent whose husband was on his way to a labor dispute and was called by ICE. Like, you know, like, so where did that information come from, you know? And that was right here, you know, that was right here in this town. But I also want to say that there is a misconception out there, and right now it's in the papers, about our undocumented community in Connecticut. So I do want to address that. It is data that they contribute 420 to 430 million in state and local taxes to the state of Connecticut, that they largely services that they cannot use. I mean, that's not even including, you know, paying into Social Security and everything like that on the federal level, just per year in Connecticut. We do cover pregnant women and those babies regardless of documentation status. We do cover children who are eligible, in other words, under a certain income threshold in our Medicaid system, on our Children Husky system, up to age 15. I will never apologize for expanding coverage for basic health care to all of our children, regardless of status. We're all in community together, we're all going to school together, and you know, if I have anything to do about it, we're not ripping that away from people. We fought hard to get that. So, because here in Connecticut, we need to feed our kids, we need to take care of our mothers and babies, and, you know, make sure that everybody going to school has, you know, basic health care, right? So those numbers being bantied about that is costing us, they are contributing way more than those two narrow groups are costing us, way more in state and local taxes to services that they are ineligible for and can never use, except for those two narrow categories.
Did you hand up? Oh.
I do have one last question for Dana. Dana, earlier you talked about the verified ID. Can you speak to the difference between having a verified ID, driver's license, for example, a verified ID, and a passport card. We have a lot of, obviously, we have a lot of folks, especially in the Latin community right now, who may be citizens, but who are walking around with the fear that they're just going to get picked up by ICE simply because they look Latino,
That's
right? And so what is the difference in the power of those two, between having a verified ID and, which is one thing that I encourage a lot of people to do, is look into carrying a passport card with you in case you're asked. But a lot of people, what I'm finding out is they have no idea about a passport card or what it is. So if you could speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Thank you for it. I actually dealt a lot with real ID issues with the DMV, and who was kind enough to listen to us, a bunch of immigration lawyers, when we started pushing around to expand real IDs to more than just US citizens and green card holders. Understandably, DMV wanted to keep it restricted to US citizens and green card holders because it was administratively convenient, and we get that. However, by federal law, Real ID belongs to a bunch of other classes of folks, asylees, folks with, very solid work permits, etc. In certain, but it differs from state to state how much the state is willing to expand its Real ID. In other words, simply, simply put, Real ID is for more than just US citizens. So Real ID does not prove your US citizenship. It just proves that you're here legally under some sort of a legal status. That's all. That's all Real ID is. So yes, there definitely is a benefit for that passport card, which back when I got it, I believe it's only like 20 bucks or so, or maybe even 40 bucks. Doesn't matter. It doesn't cost you much. And you could get it at the same time as when you renew your passport. And it's on the same application form as your passport book. They call your passport the passport book, and then a separate plastic card, the passport card. I highly advise anyone who wants a more safety on themselves to get the passport card, because it's literally as big as your driver's license, your Real ID, right? So it fits nicely into your wallet. And that's all the proof of US citizenship you need, because it should be recognizable by ICE, which drives me to additional point that you're making. US citizenship is fluid in this country. You have naturalized citizens, you've got citizens of ethnic backgrounds that might speak with an accent, look differently, etc. They're all US citizens. Even if they're all US citizens, they may be different and can trigger suspicion for being here unlawfully with ICE, right? And so to counteract this type of profiling, which has been unfortunately declared kind of sort of legal by the Supreme Court, people should be wearing their passport cards. Now, the other part of why people should be wearing their passport cards is because of the issue of collateral arrests. We've seen and heard in the news that a lot of US citizens have been picked up at the same time as other undocumented. When there's a major operation going down and ICE comes to a neighborhood or a factory or whatever, they may or may not have time to sift through who's a US citizen and who's not. You may or may not have on you proof of citizenship. So you may get picked up even if you're a US citizen, just because maybe you look differently and you look like you might be here unlawfully. And so collateral arrests are happening all the time against US citizens who are later released. But in the meantime, it's unpleasant few days, up to a few days of detention for these US citizens until someone locates their birth certificate or their passport card or something. And so yet another reason for all of us who can to wear the passport cards on you and avoid collateral arrests.
Dual citizenship, has that status been compromised recently?
Well, it's very hard to compromise dual citizenship without passing through Congress. Right now, the US takes the view that once you are a US citizen, all they see you as is a US citizen. In other words, Say you are originally from Hungary and you come and naturalize and now you're a dual Hungarian American citizen. Okay. At some point you commit a capital offense and you're on the death row and you're saying, but wait guys, I'm from Hungary and in Hungary they don't have the death penalty. Consulate of Hungary, please save me. No, no. You once a US citizen, you're subject to all things American. American laws, American death penalty, American culture, American Second Amendment, American First Amendment, everything, right? They don't care that you are also Hungarian citizens. So that is the concept, the eyes with which the US sees dual citizens. And the problem from the US side, there is no problem yet from the US side of having a second citizenship. It's just that it gets woefully ignored when it comes to you invoking it to defend yourself from US law consequences. The problem may appear from the other country. So you always have to check with the other country if it allows a second citizenship like the US, because that's where the problem is. And I'll tell you, until recently, Germany did not allow a second citizenship, but they changed their mind. Same with Ukraine and a bunch of other countries. And that's where the problem is from the other country. The US so far it doesn't care if you have 1, 2, 3, or 10 citizenships, as long as you comply with all things US. IRS taxes on your worldwide income, and all other US laws.
Okay, so I want to thank our 3 guests tonight. Thank you so much for your time. This has been very, very
so
informative.
informative.
I've learned so much myself. And thank you all for coming.